Welcome to this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, story lover since the family movie night discussions enjoyed as a child. And today she's an author, she's an podcaster. So we'll learn all that from her. We'll discuss about her book, The Space Between Time. Welcome to the show, Lucinda.
Thank you, Ajay. It's nice to be back with you again.
On the show, this time on the Author's Voice with KJ Stream, a special series from the KAJ Masterclass.
Yes.
We'll talk about the book this time. We'll talk about, but before that, let's understand a journey about, I spoke just a little so that I could hear directly from you, your journey towards becoming a author, from those movie nights to author of books today.
Well, the movie nights led me to a lot of things that have to do with stories. My education, almost all my education was about stories. I loved religious studies as my first degree, and I loved all of the old stories from the Bible and learning about the myths of how other religions got started. And then I added theater and speech, and I got so I added that to my BA, and then I got a master's in theater. I worked in the theater. I taught drama. I taught English. So almost everything has to do with stories that I've done. In 2008, I retired from teaching public school and started teaching theater at the local community college. And it was just a part-time job there. So I had time to write. And at first I was writing a memoir, which I wasn't ready to write a memoir then. It didn't turn out very good. But I had this story that I had started in 1999 about a daughter and a father and their relationship. And so I revived that. And of course, eventually it became The Space Between Time. Unfortunately, the father-daughter relationship isn't as prominent as I wanted it to be because my father was a big influence in my life. But the story is a 2-timeline story. There's a woman in the present named Jenna who has this horrible day where her fiance breaks her engagement, and then she gets to work and she gets a call. Her mother's been in a terrible accident, and she has to drive down to Roseburg, Oregon from Portland, where she works in a publishing company. And unfortunately, her mother dies. And so when she gets back after the funeral, she loses her job. So she goes back to Roseburg to try to figure out what she's going to do with her life. And when she's there cleaning out the attic, she finds this box that is locked, and she has to find the key. And this apparition appears, and she's dressed in this pre-Civil War dress. And Jenna had started having these really weird experiences, like she could see people's auras and stuff. And so the appearance of the apparition is like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But she finds in the box some journals. And when she starts reading the first journal, she discovers later, by her 3 times great-grandmother, who went from Vermont to Oregon on the Oregon Trail in 1859, which is when Oregon became a state. So at that time, there were all those eastern states, and then there was California and Oregon on the West Coast, and then there was this big territory in between. And she goes to be a teacher because she has her education in teaching, and her name is Morgan. And when Jenna opens the journal to begin reading, she enters Morgan's consciousness. she doesn't travel there physically. She enters Morgan's consciousness and lives life with her for a while. And when she goes back home, she is back in her time period with no time has passed. So it's kind of convenient because she can read Morgan's journals and nobody will question her about where have you been? But both women are on a journey of self-discovery, of learning to love themselves, of standing up for their rights, and wanting to do some good in the world. But how do they do that? What should they be doing? And so those are the themes of the book. And I have a sequel in the works that I am revising now called Time's Echo. And both women are working in the various women's movements of their time. Morgan is working on the suffrage movement, trying to get the vote for women, and Jenna is just trying to maintain women's rights. She's working to maintain women's rights in the present. So that's kind of what's going on in the book. They both go through a lot of trials and tribulations and tragedies, but they're trying to heal their traumas and they're trying to, do some good in the world. And those are the themes.
Absolutely, Lucinda. So I want to understand for the audience, what does the space between time mean, and how should people consider this book as? Is it a political book? Is it a historical book, or is it a time travel book, or what is it?
Well, it is a little bit of a time travel and it is a little bit of a historical book because I happen to be an Oregon Trail descendant. And so when I was researching Morgan's journey from Vermont to Oregon in 1859, it took a long time to get there. She had to go by train and she had to go by riverboat. And eventually she got to Independence where she joined the wagon train. And then it took like 5 or 6 months to travel from Independence to Southern Oregon. So, it was practically a whole year she was trying to get to Oregon. And I learned a lot about how the wagon trains were constructed, how many people usually went, who the leaders were, what trails they took, where they went to resupply, things like that I had probably learned when I was a child, but didn't really remember any of that stuff. So that was really interesting. And then it's also a little bit political because, well, it leads to the political stuff in the second book. But yeah, it is a little bit political in that, women didn't really have a lot of rights in the 1800s. And so, Morgan's trying to assert her rights. She has an aunt who is living in Boston who wants to control her life, and she has to escape her aunt. She also helped at one point before her father died. She was a little bit involved in the Underground Railroad movement, helping people get from, the South up to Canada or wherever they were going to get away from slavery. So there is a little bit of that in the book. But mostly the first book is just Jenna and Morgan and their introspection, and they're trying to figure out their lives and deal with their traumas and that kind of thing. So,
absolutely. So, what inspired this particular sort of story? Because it needs a lot of effort. These books need a lot of thinking, lots of effort. You have got to look at the past. You got to look at the present, and you perhaps also have to look into the future.
Yes. Well, when I was a senior in high school, I fell in love with classic British literature. And so at one point, so I started reading even after I finished school. I started reading some of the uh, most famous authors in classic British literature. At one point, this was after I was married, I saw a mini series called Middlemarch, and I said, "Oh, wow, that's really great. I'm going to go read the book." Well, this is the book. It's over 800 pages. But it's kind of but it's this slow burn book where you find out about the relationships of the people in the town and what their aspirations are, and their relationships to each other. And so it's a kind of a slow moving book. And the first third is there's not a lot of action. It's you're just finding out about the characters. And then then the story gets started. Well, one time, shortly after I published my book, I sent my book to a fellow author that I had only met online. And I had read some of her books. And the first 3 books that I read of hers were just, I loved them. They were fantasy books, but they were just, the world building was amazing. And so I sent her my book and asked her if she would be willing to review it. Well, she came back and said, "Your book, I don't know if I want to review your book because I thought your book was glacial. It didn't move very fast." And I was kind of hurt at first. And then I realized, oh, I've been reading all these classic British books that, they don't move very fast. Middlemarch was one of those books where it was a serial in like a newspaper or something, or a magazine, so that you only got a little part of it. You read that, and then the next month you got a little bit more of the book, and then you read that. And so it was sort of like what we have now, the books that are, you have these series of a series that you read that have 12 or 24 books or however many books there are. And so, then I realized, oh, it's okay. It's okay if my book moves slowly, because in a way I am kind of tired of stories that are so jam-packed that you don't have a chance to take a breath or to really understand what's going on with the characters. And there's not a lot of introspection. The characters don't get a lot of time to do introspection. And that's what my book is. My characters do a lot of introspection. So Middlemarch is one of the books that influenced me. Yeah.
Absolutely, Lucinda. So, in terms of this particular book, means it was to be very challenging to write a book like The Space Between Time, or was it very easy for you?
The parts in the past were fairly easy because, we already know pretty much about all the stuff that happened then. Creating the Jenna's journey was more difficult for me because, in a way I was putting myself in her place. Not that I had the same things happen to me exactly, but I did have times in my life where my life kind of fell apart and I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And I had to do a lot of soul searching and figuring out what it was I wanted to do, what I wanted out of my life. So that part was more challenging. And it's even that way now in the book that I'm writing. The past is easier for me to write than Jenna's stuff, because in Time's Echo, Jenna is dealing with all the political stuff that's going on right now. And she's trying to figure out, how she can help women maintain their independence and their rights.
Absolutely. So you want to find solutions to the political issues in the second book, Time's Echo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge mess. The whole world is sort of in a mess right now. And but that's not a bad thing necessarily, because you can go along and everything's really great, but it's kind of boring. It's kind of boring when every day is exactly the same and you're not challenged. If we're not challenged, we don't grow. So now is a really challenging time and we get this really great chance to grow.
Absolutely. So when is the next book coming? Time Seco, when is that getting published?
Well, I'm hoping to do it sometime next year. I'm revising it right now, and I do have one of my podcast guests happens to be an author and a ghostwriter, and she's agreed to help me with it. So once I get it to a place where I think I can send it to her and have her make comments and help me shape it better, I'll be sending it to her probably later this year sometime. Yeah, because I have so many other balls in the air that sometimes it's hard to find the time to finish revising. But yeah, I've carved out a couple of weeks this month to do that. So next year sometime probably.
Absolutely. So in an age of this fantasy writing and all that stuff, how do you see the space of your type of books that you are writing? Is do you think this book, which will be much more static, which will not move much, will those be still having a lot of attention,
Well, this book is a kind of magical realism book, and things do happen. I mean, people die, and there's lots of challenges that the characters go through. Jenna, for one example, Jenna's fiance comes back. He's given her a bunch of really expensive jewelry, and his life has fallen apart. And so he comes to get the jewelry. Well, it's in a safe deposit box, but he gets all angry with her and beats her up. So, things like that happen. But yeah, I think that I need stories of all different kinds that examine the inner life of characters, because we're so used to looking at the outside world and blaming our lot in life on something that happens outside of us. And that's really what happens outside of us comes from what's going on inside of us. So yeah, my book might be a little slow for some people, but it's trying to encourage people to, you got to stop and heal yourself and take care of yourself and figure out why patterns keep happening to you and stuff like that. That's kind of all in the books.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, what do you want readers of your book to take away with them?
That they are powerful beings because they are in charge of what happens to them. They're in charge of their lives. They're in charge of either living a miserable life or a happy life. And sometimes that takes a lot of work because you have to love yourself if you're going to be happy. And that's not an easy thing usually. So that's kind of what I want them to take away mostly.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you about all this. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, Lucinda, connect with you, your book, as well as, the new book that is due for next year, as you said, and also your podcast, Story Power. So what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, they can find me at my website, which is Sage Woman Chronicles on WordPress, and it's at sagewoman.life. And they can, that's where I post my podcasts. That's where I post my new YouTube channel, Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters. And I also have a blog, but I have kind of suspended the blog for for a while because I have so many other things going on. But occasionally I'll write blog posts. But I started the blog in 2013, so there's plenty of content for people to read if they want to read my blog. And there are lots of podcasts that they can listen to there too. My podcast is also on Spotify and on Apple and Amazon, and I put it up on YouTube also. So, they can find it on their favorite podcast outlet. Yeah, that's the best place to find me and contact me.
Absolutely. And writing such books, going back into time. Have you ever wondered yourself going back into time and getting that sort of a power for yourself, Lucinda?
Well, yes, I do think about that, and my brother is doing our family tree ancestry, and I did have my DNA done recently for him to help him add to the family tree. I do have a membership with ancestry.com, but I'm so busy I don't have time to do that, but I am interested. And one thing I found out from my brother was that on both sides of our family, our ancestors were here on this continent in the 1600s. So that's a long time, relatively speaking. And there are kind of some famous people in our family tree also. So that's interesting too.
Absolutely. And sometimes I just wonder if I were to get only one wish, to go either in time back into the future or past or in the future. Which one would you choose, Lucinda? Go into the past or peep into the future?
Well, if I couldn't stay in my current time, I think I would go into the future. Because I'm hoping that it will be a lot more hopeful than it is right now. But I'm kind of happy where I am right now, actually. But future, I think, is where I would go.
Absolutely. And that is where the books come in. The writer's imagination takes people, into so many places, from past to present to future to present to lots of different dimensions. That is where the power of books like yours come into, the space between time. So with this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Bye-bye.